Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another Creating Work and Working Creatively with Fintorn Bay Arts as part of the AMP music program. This week, I'm joined by Duncan McBean, a music producer, DJ, label owner, and events manager and promoter based in the northeast of Scotland. Duncan and I actually both grew up in Forres, where he's based at the moment, the small town adjacent to Fintorn, where Fintorn Bay Arts is also based. Tonight, we're going to be discussing and comparing the differences between working in these fields mentioned above in a rural and an urban setting. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to Duncan. So please give him a virtual round of applause.
Hey,
how's it going, Duncan? You all right?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Yourself?
No complaints. No complaints. So just before we get started, I've given you obviously a very brief introduction. But I thought you could give a bit of a bigger background as to who you are, kind of what first got you into dance music and the creative scene.
Yep, cool. Well, I've been a DJ since I was about a teenager. Since I was 15, I got my first set of decks. I've always been fascinated by it and loved music, so I kind of learned to play on old Newmark belt drive turntables with like kind of hard trance records and things like that, and kind of just over the years learned, and then once I started turning 18, started kind of playing in the clubs and in kind of local area north of Scotland, and then started to kind of dabble in music production, learning, going to like Soma School, Subsign Academy, learning different things, Tourum Academy, and just doing various courses over the years. Started up Flick, and then that's kind of merged into from a club night into a record label now as well. So that's been quite an interesting transition from progressing into a record label as well. It's been good.
Yeah, so I know that obviously we both kind of cut our teeth at the same parties up north, kind of private parties. But I was just wondering, was there any point where you kind of just knew, because you're saying you were 15 and picking up decks and stuff like that, but was there anything in particular that kind of drove that? Or like, because obviously not being surrounded by dance music in the northeast of Scotland, was there like a particular moment that kind of preceded your interest?
Well, I used to have friends that were kind of a bit older than me that would play, and I'd go down to like their house on the weekends and watch and think, well, that's pretty cool. I want to learn how to do that, and just got more and more interested in it. And when the opportunity came up to get a set of decks, I actually swapped it for an old motorbike. Somebody wanted my motorbike and I wanted a set of decks. We've done a trade, and then I wanted rid of the bike, he wanted rid of the decks, so it kind of worked out quite well. And then just ever since then I just kind of got stuck into it. And
and just for context, do you want to give us a little bit of a background as to where you are now, like geographically, and what work you do outside of creative work?
Yeah, so I'm based in Forres. I've kind of always been in and around here in local area. All my family's kind of from here, so outside of work, I've got a day job, so I work with Scottish Water in waste management, kind of during the day, and then at night I spend some of my time on the creative
in the studio with headphones on. Much in such the same as myself. Although we've been talking about this at the minute. I don't know where the hours are going, and they seem to be getting shorter and shorter. Life seems to be getting in the way. But we'll talk about that later on, actually. So for anyone interested in how we manage our time. So I'd like to get stuck in with your kind of personal creative career in a rural area. As you mentioned, you're based in Forres in the northeast, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, is a small town half an hour east of Inverness on the northeast coast. It's a very traditional kind of rural area. There's lots of what you might expect up there. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about what it is that makes you want to stay in the area, and what you love about it.
Yeah, well, I think that because I've kind of grown up here, all my family's here, all my jobs always been about here. And in the waste management industry, there's not exactly, it's quite a niche work, really. So I've always kind of had, my career's always been here, and, my partner, and, it's just a kind of home life has always been here. I've never really had a desire to move away, because I'm always quite content living here and enjoy being around in the area, and
kind of had everything that you wanted from life, so to speak.
Yeah, that's it.
In terms of DJing and performing, what's been your? I think we'll go kind of overall at the moment, and then we can kind of dial in on it. But what's been your like overall experience of DJing in the area, and how have you, from your outset of getting those belt drive decks, how have you translated that into finding opportunities and gigs and ways to perform?
Yeah, well, I think that, once I kind of turned 18, I started kind of pitching out for opportunities, and I started those competitions, and I started entering pretty much every competition that I could find in the local area, whether it was Aberdeen or Inverness or Elgin or just anywhere, to try and get my name out there. And I think it's quite important to reach out to these people as well, and just try to expand that network and start getting used to it. There's nothing, if I look back on what I was playing like when I was 18 in a club, it's completely different to what I am now. And, even understanding of how to work a floor and how to read a floor at the same time, you always learn that right at the start when it's like an empty room and there's maybe 2 or 3 people going. That's, it's a lot harder to keep 2 or 3 people dancing than 200-300.
Than a full club. I mean, especially, I think that's a really interesting point. And even maybe more so in a rural area, maybe because there isn't an awful lot of opportunity or chances to play anyway in the first place. The pool of people wanting to go out and listen to that kind of music is a lot smaller as well. And so like learning the hard lessons pretty early on about how to quite successfully clear a room and play to an empty room for the majority of your set and see whether it translates later on and the next guest comes on or not. But I think because in the city, obviously there's so many places that you can go, and because there's a higher number of people in the club from the outset, if it doesn't go totally right, there's still a few people around. I mean, I've definitely played and cleared the room a few times down here too, but
there's a lot more demand for it. There's a lot more people. But I think that's kind of one of the, although there's not as many people here, it can actually create something quite special at the same time when you do get that numbers through and there are people there. Everyone's enjoying themselves, and there can be a really nice atmosphere.
Absolutely. You mentioned just briefly that you had been reaching out to people. How did you find out about these clubs in the first place?
I think just social media really, and thinking about the kind of artists that I was into, and looking at, well, where are they playing? And maybe like Gary Beck was playing in Aberdeen, and I was playing Gary Beck's tunes at that point, and it was like, well, I want to enter that competition to warm up for him because I like that tunes. And just trying to just putting your name in the hat really, and seeing kind of what happened, and it kind of just get to meet people and expand that network. So
it went from there. And you're saying about competitions, because that's a really interesting thing as well, I think, because that's such a really good opportunity for people to have their voices heard, because a lot of times promoters or event managers or record labels or even DJs themselves, if they're full-time, they may not have the time to be able to check every single email that gets sent to them by a budding DJ or a budding producer or whatnot, and competitions from promoters and stuff like that. I think a lot of people sometimes think, there's no point, I'm not going to win, or I won't get noticed. But even without technically, winning the competition per se, you're still making yourself known, and you're still a consideration. You're still getting your name into people's mouths who are the people who are running events. And it can be a really useful tool for anyone who's not sure how to approach a promoter or may feel slightly overwhelmed by the thought of doing so.
I think it's just about getting involved, whether you win or you don't, or even just being present at these nights and getting to know people. And it can be a little bit more challenging in the north because you've got to go to Aberdeen or you've got to go to Inverness, or, there's always a drive. So I found myself either
Yes.
running a bus with a
Yeah.
squad of people or driving back and forward. But then you're leaving Aberdeen at 3:30 and
Getting
you're
home at
not home
six,
by
7 in the morning.
6:30 and you're knackered, so
Yeah.
it's kind of challenging to do that at the same time and be everywhere. I mean, I've had people drive up to gigs to play in Forest before, and they drove right back down the same night. And the A9 and it can be quite a treacherous road sometimes. So it's getting from A to B can be quite difficult. Whereas
Yeah.
you're in Glasgow, you can walk from Lachita to Sub Club to Berkeley
Exactly.
Street. You've
And home again as
there.
well, like it's a very short taxi ride. Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point, is the thinking about the logistics of doing so as well. And for a lot of people, accessibility to these forms of transport are just not there, whether it be having a car or having the money to be able to pay for a taxi, or the public transport links just not being accessible, as in, if you go through to Inverness from Forres, the last train is 10 o'clock at night, or the last bus is 9:30 p.m. And I mean, the night's not even begun by that point. So
Well, that's it. You can
makes it
get
very
through,
difficult.
you can get through okay, but it's getting home
Yeah.
is the challenging part sometimes.
Yeah. I think that kind of like leads me on to my next question, which is like, you've obviously played in a wide variety of places. And I was just wondering, other than what we've just talked about, the logistics of a rural gig and getting to and from it, what are some other comparisons to a more traditional environment, like say Glasgow or Edinburgh, that you can make a comparison for gigs?
Yeah, I think that gigs in clubs and in cities and things, everything's all set up and ready to go. Whereas a lot of the time in the rural settings, and even certainly in forests, we've got to take the rig in, we've got to set the lights up and take everything back down again sometimes. So it's a completely start to finish process, whereas you turn up to a club in Edinburgh and everything's all ready to go. Some people might have to take the decks in, but it's in a rural setting quite often it's kind of DIY to a certain extent. So you're just starting with an empty room and you've got to build that up to create it, which also gives you a little bit more creative freedom to be able to build it in the way that you want. You're not restricted to the confinements of that space. You can kind of make it your own space at the same time as well.
That's a really interesting point. I think I guess also as well, you're looking at finding more unique actual physical spaces that aren't designed for a large group of people and a big sound system. And within that, it can create something really special that is going to stick in someone's mind more so than maybe their fourth night out at the same club that month. Do you know what I mean? Regardless of who's playing or something like that, a lot of the surroundings that you find yourself in can be really poignant and help to create a special moment that will make you want to repeat that going forward. But with less, so like with less clubs and dedicated nightlife venues in the area, how did you go about finding venues when you first started DJing and wanting to put on your own nights?
Yeah, well, for me in town, in Forest, there's not a huge amount of venues there, and the Eagle was always like that. I'd been asking to do a gig in there for years, and I just never. They just kind of said no at the start, and it wasn't until like a few years later where I kind of asked and was like, okay, right, well, let's do this, let's see how it goes, and after that they're like, okay, well, we can this works, this is cool, and we can kind of go with it. So it was good.
I guess, carry on. Sorry.
No, it's just because there's not that many. I mean, there used to be a lot of things in like the Vic, for example, which is a massive space, and it's either 100 cap or 400 cap. So there's not a lot in between, really. Well, there isn't anything in between. You're quite restricted. But I think sometimes the smaller venues can build to quite an intimate vibe, and it's rather than a massive empty room, it's everyone's kind of there in the moment, which is really good.
I mean, especially in that it can also create a demand for the night if, for example, you sell out because you have managed to reach capacity at
Yeah.
100, it mentally does something as well to those who are attending, but those who may have missed out will then be more likely to jump on the bandwagon earlier and try and get a ticket for the next one.
Yep.
Um,
So I've had to turn people away before, and it's like 11 o'clock at night, and they're like, "Sorry, you can't come in," and they don't understand. Like, well, if you come to the next one, this is the date.
yeah,
Arrive in the first half an hour, and you're all right. Because
yeah,
sometimes we
yeah,
can have 40, 50 people through in the first 45 minutes.
yeah,
And that's half the
yeah,
venue, and it's because people have sometimes learned, oh, right, we need to actually, if we want to go to this, we can't turn up at midnight and expect to get in.
yeah.
You need to be there in the first hour, really.
And that's really good for, especially really good for if you're bringing in, like up and coming local acts to do warm ups or support a bigger name DJ. They're actually getting experience of playing to a dance floor, which
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about is obviously very transformative and enlightening to play to an empty floor, but it's also just as important to be able to learn how to read a room when there's people on the dance floor and see how it ebbs and flows, because especially in a small venue, it doesn't take much for a couple of people to say, "Oh, come on, let's go out for a smoke," or something like that. And then it can feel like a ghost town straight away,
Yeah, everyone goes at the same time because it's such a kind of close-knit community as well.
Yeah.
Everyone's all friends. So if one person goes or two people go, they're like, "Oh, well, we'll go as well." And all of a sudden there's 5 or 6 people that have went outside for a cigarette or something, and then, where'd they go? Then
Exactly.
everyone comes back in and then it's full again. It's
and it's trying not to lose your cool in that moment of being like, have I just done something completely terrible? Is everyone leaving? And yeah, it still happens. I'm still constantly like, is that because that song wasn't right? And you just have to kind of learn to trust in yourself.
I've had to explain that to guests before. Like if all of a sudden 5 or 10 people just leave, like it's not because you've played the wrong song or anything. It's just because they've all went outside to have a smoke because they're all one core kind of group of people that are all friends. So it's not
they all want to have a chat.
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah, obviously in comparison, in Glasgow, there's lots of club spaces and event promoters. With that can actually come a lot more opportunities to be heard as a DJ. And I was just wondering, because that is obviously a luxury down here that we have. And even Glasgow's scene is small in comparison to, say, London, that has hundreds of thousands of places to play. But it makes an artist maybe a little bit it's a little bit easier for them to get spotted, and make and continue a career in doing so. And I was wondering how in a rural area you sustain your own passion and career, because those opportunities are less so.
Yeah, well, I think it's for me it was partly where kind of Flick came from, because I wanted to kind of create my own opportunities. I remember being 18, 19 and pitching all over the place, and I was playing festivals here, there, and I was trying to be everywhere, and then realized I'm doing that because there's maybe not something as consistent in my hometown. I was like, well, maybe I create that thing, and people that are 18, 19 like me at that stage in their life don't necessarily have to be flitting about all over the place. Let's kind of try and create something that's here that people can learn and people can grow, and without the need to go to Aberdeen every weekend or Glasgow, or let's kind of create something here and see what we can do with it.
And also I think as well, like a really important factor of that is the affordability of it. You don't necessarily need to travel 300 miles or 300 miles, 150 miles, spend 30 quid on a ticket to a massive event, because that's you like in some ways being like, okay, well, obviously I'm not going to be going out every weekend to do that. So I'm going to justify it by going to one big major event that's got a massive stacked lineup of international DJs. And of course, those events are great, but creating your own environment in which to be able to do something affordably in your local town means that people can go out and get used to going out regularly, enjoying the culture that nightlife brings, that maybe they would only be able to enjoy once a month if they were, like you say, going through to Aberdeen or going down to Glasgow, or saving up for like a big all-day party or something like that goes on.
I think there's still like an element of discoverability as well in the local area, because we had people at the gig on Saturday that have lived here for a year and had no idea that stuff like this even happened. You know, they used to stay in Bristol, and you know, Bristol's just mad for their electronic music, and you know, come up here and think that it's just a sleepy little town and there's nothing happening. Whereas actually,
there's a drum and bass night going on in the local pub.
Yeah, and really enjoyed it, and you know, went home happy and like, well, when's the next one, kind of thing. So it kind of, it's good to get that return people as well, that they're like, oh well, this is actually quite fun and quite good, so when's the next one, when can we come along, so, which is always encouraging if people are wanting to come back.
Yeah, if they're asking about it as well. In terms of your own personal career and your production career and DJing, what are some things about being in the kind of rural area that sustain your passion and career? You know, like we mentioned last week, you do a lot of driving, and that affords you a lot of time to listen to music. I was just wondering if there's anything else along those lines that, by living in Forres and having this kind of open freedom, if that kind of inspires you and helps to motivate you.
Yeah, well, I think that just, I'm quite motivated anyway, and just in general, I always want to write tunes, and I want to spend as much time as I can, you know, making music. And sometimes you can be, you know, I'm driving down the A9 and I'm thinking about, I hear a hook in a track, and then I'm like, oh well, I then have an idea, and then I'm home that night and I'm like, right, let's try and make something like that, and just that little bit of inspiration to try and come up with something that is fresh and just on that idea there and then, kind of thing. I've seen myself pulling over in laybys, and I'll have like a little vocal loop in my head, and I'll pull over in the lay-by, and I'll just speak it into it and record it.
Oh, brilliant!
And then I can come home, and then I'll put that through, you know, the voice box, and then I'll record that into Ableton, and then all of a sudden I've got a little hook vocal that I've thought about randomly as I'm driving about the countryside. Little things like that can be quite, you know, all it takes is one little spark like that, and then that's me for 2 weeks, because I'm often one
on that same little loop.
You know, because all of a sudden I've written, you know, 2-3 tracks off of just one little simple idea, because that idea then merges into maybe 2 or 3 other alternations of that, and you know, it kind of grows arms and legs a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I was having a conversation on Saturday, just being with someone, and we were talking about the power of traveling and listening to music, and how expansive it really can open up your subconscious to hearing it in a different way, and in the same way as being, you know, like going out for a walk and listening to music. It's something about the motion of it, like unlocks something within you, rather than feeling kind of restricted by sitting at an office desk or working with lots of different people, and there being constantly lots of things coming into your personal space that can distract you. You've got just even the physicality of the landscape, and where you're working and spending a lot of your time. There aren't a huge amount of distractions in that regard.
I think tail end of last year, I was kind of just thinking about different ideas for sampling, and I downloaded a playlist, like it was like the 70s playlist, and I just started listening to like the whole thing, because I had to go up and down the Perth, so that's like 6 hours drive, you know, and I just listened to the whole thing, and it was amazing the amount of like little loops and little songs that I kind of screenshotted and think, well, I can maybe sample that, and even the amount of songs that you hear from the 70s that were maybe sampled in the 90s, like all that kind of things, like I know that from somewhere, and that's where the original samples come from that you had no idea. Things like
Fat was the original track from the 90s, and it turns out
which is just kind of listening to a lot, and not just listening to, you know, I'll get that little loop idea listening to techno, but actually sometimes listen to a little bit of funk and soul, and that sparks a whole other idea.
Way of thinking. Yeah. And it's also, I mean, techno in its originality was very full of funk and swing, and is, you know, like it comes from a rich history of experimentation within pre-existing norms and pushing the boundaries. So it does obviously makes total sense. I'm very envious of you that you are able to listen to music all the time and be driving doing so, because there's nothing better than listening to good music and driving. It's one of my favorite things. I thought what we might do is we've got some footage of you DJing and producing kind of simultaneously. which we've talked a little bit about as a sort of hybrid set. So I'd like to share that with the folks that are tuned in so they can get a better picture of what it is that you do.
Cool.
This was taken at the Universal Hall. Maybe you can give us a little bit of background about what this video is about before we put it on.
So there was I seen something, I think it was online. I suppose it's back to the opportunities, you see something and go for it. I seen this and it was, they called it the big show off. So there was loads of people there. There was, there was poets, there was people with violins, there was people doing comedy sketches, and it was just all anything that you wanted to show off to the local area, get in touch. So I got in touch and explained what I'd done and offered to try and do like a live set. And then that ended up merging into, they wanted me to DJ at the end as well. And I'd said, well, why don't I play live for 5-10 minutes and then I'll merge that into one set kind of thing. And then end of the night, so people were up, everyone was seated until I kind of went on, and then it gave the people opportunity to come up and dance, which was quite cool, just watching a couple of people get up and then all of a sudden the room's full, which was quite a nice moment to
well, brilliant. We'll watch that and then we can talk a little bit more about those opportunities.
Cool.
I think we might be having some technicals. Steve is in the background dealing with that. He'll give me a little nod to let me know that it's up and running when it is. But in the meantime, we can just press on. So for a lot of people in rural areas, there isn't really an option to move from the area. I was in a very privileged position and was able to finance the move for myself. But for those who find that isn't an option, what sort of resources, and we've talked about opportunities, what sort of resources are available to help people develop their practice or their passion?
I think there's actually quite a lot out there for this kind of thing. I started learning about things by going to festivals like Expo North and Wide Days. So Expo North is obviously just in Inverness, so that was a great. And then started hearing about all these different, the charities that like Help Musicians UK. There's Creative Scotland. There's all these areas of funding that are available, and I personally feel that a lot of these funds are underrepresented by electronic music. You'll probably get 100 people pitching to Help Musicians UK to write an album, but you'll in a guitar and in a traditional studio setting, but you maybe get one person that wants to go to an electronic studio. So it gives you that opportunity, it helps them tick a box as well to be more balanced across what they're actually funding. So onto their websites, there's lots of opportunities there. It depends what you want to learn. I've been through like Soma School, which turned into then Sign Academy. I've done every course that they've got and been through Toolham Academy. I'm on mentoring at the moment with Shadow Child, Reset Robot, and Nick Hawks. So I'm kind of working with them in the background on some bits and pieces that I've got going on, which has been really good. I had a session with Dave, Reset Robot, last week. So that was getting some feedback on my music and, trying to just make it as good as I can, really. So there's lots of opportunities, but I think Help Musicians UK is one of the main ones I would recommend looking into. There's on their website, it's great. There's a lot of pots of funding, and they've actually changed the model that it used to be like they'd open a fund and there's a deadline, and now it's completely open-ended. So if you've got an idea, build it and pitch, and then you hear back within.
That's brilliant.
So it takes that, because I was sitting waiting, right, when's the next deadline, and trying to plan my fund. I spent more time doing funding applications sometimes than I do making music, but it helps because then it helps the music in a sense. So it's
absolutely. And I think as well, it's really good to not necessarily have like a deadline looming over you, in that you can really create the application to really tailor what you want it to be without pressure and without a time limit in doing so. And maybe as you are writing it, you may decide that you want something different, but if you're under a deadline, you might just have to submit it as is.
I think on the flip side of that, so on the flip side of that, on a flip side of that, I think that having a deadline can be quite handy sometimes, because I've got an idea of a funding application that I've had sitting for 3 months that I've just not been able to get to because I know I can submit it anytime. So there's also the other side of it.
I
Which
guess
can be,
it depends how everyone works, really.
yeah, that's it.
I'm definitely the open-ended is more my thing, but I can it resonates quite acutely that I just don't get anything done. so it's who knows. Also as well, I guess we've obviously talked a little bit before about you said you're playing tunes from there's a techno producer called Gary Beck, and you see he's DJing at the tunnels, for example. Do you also, in ways like to help develop your creative career, have you in the past just reached out to some of your peers and things like that? And if so, do you have any advice for anyone who thinks, oh, there's no point, they'll never read it, they'll never get back in touch with me?
I think there's definite worthwhile reaching out to people. I've emailed Gary Beck before, and he's got back to me saying, "Oh, I like this," or maybe try sending it to like Mark Broom because it sounds like Mark Broom, or to not Dozzy. I think at these gigs, say hello. Just go up and say hello. Everyone, we're all humans. You know what I mean? It's just to say hello and drop them a message. Try and find an email address. If you do a little bit of digging, sometimes you can find them on people's Instagram bios, and there's contact details there. I think emails generally the best way to reach out to people because I think some people get so many messages on Instagram or Facebook that some of them times they're just switched off, or they're just too many of them to filter through. But if you find a personal email address, and I think be personable. I get links sent to me sometimes. It's just a link. And there's no context, and I get people continuously do it, and it's like I'm too busy to even be like, well, what's this?
Just
be like, hey Duncan, I've got a new mix or a new song. Can you listen? Sure, happily.
Create a bit of a relationship with the person that you're, because you're also asking them to do something for you and on their own time and their own personal time a lot of the times as well. I'm being told in the wings that the video is ready to roll. So once again, we'll go through that and then we'll pick this back up again.
Sound.
In a traditional club context. Doesn't necessarily work. My sister played cello for a long time. She still does, actually, and she's also an opera singer. I have my own experience with playing like classical piano as well. Recently I was in San Francisco supporting John Hopkins, and it was this beautiful old theater, and I was asked to play warm-up for 1 hour. I didn't really know what to do. I don't want to go out at 8 p.m. and try and make everyone dance to some happy house music. So I saw it as more as a challenge to maybe play some music that I've made personally that doesn't necessarily work in a traditional club context. So it became more like an exhibition, like a showcase. And yeah, it was very valuable, I think, because if you restrict yourself to only like clubs or festivals, you only have one objective, is to make people dance. But in those cases, I think you can make people think as well, or be a bit more analytical about DJing as an art. I think my main motivation when I'm making music is just because it's like therapy. It's something which has for 7 or 8 years now been something which I feel is a reliable source of solace, essentially. Like sometimes everyone goes through ups and downs with creative stuff, and so do I. My main inspiration is essentially building on that relationship. I mean, it makes me happy. Like it takes my mind off of things that happen around me sometimes. And right now, yes, people produce for various reasons. Right now in the industry, it sometimes feel as though if you're a producer, your end goal should be to be a DJ. And I personally never had that goal, essentially. I never worked towards that. It was pretty coincidental, actually. things in my life, and I felt whatever I could do creatively and musically would automatically channel that. And there's only been a handful of moments in my life where that have been truly overwhelming emotionally. And in that time, I've been extremely productive. So for my first album, I tried to have certain songs that were not necessarily sad or melancholic, because when you go through something in your life that is sad or depressing, there usually are some moments or glimpses of happiness. And I felt those kind of moments every now and then. And towards the last end of producing the album, I definitely had those moments where this is actually nice. I can actually walk down the street and feel like a human being. Maybe things are going to be fine. Right now, I'm okay. I'm very happy in my life. I don't really have anything.
Wow. That looks so cool. I mean, the backdrop on that is just amazing as well. Just the whole thing, like it just like people were like properly grooving and having a dance. And I mean, I don't know, like I guess some people who will be tuning into this will know about the Universal Hall, but a lot of people won't. But the Universal Hall is a community space in the Fintorn Foundation that is very, very, very beautiful and is a multi-purpose space. Is used for theater, movie, film, TV, traditional big band, everything. And it's a kind of hexagonal shape with like amphitheater sort of seating, benches all around. And Duncan, where you were playing there, was right kind of slap bang in the middle of the dance floor with this huge video mapped screen behind you, I'm guessing. But it looks amazing. Like usually you only see those kind of visuals on like a certain size of a screen, but seeing it being expansive and taking up the whole wall must have, because it's its own light show. You don't need any stage production lights for anything like that.
No,
Vision at all. I mean,
I was kind of oblivious to it as well, because it wasn't until I was quite oblivious to it as well. It wasn't until I watched the video back and think that's actually quite cool, because I had my back to it the whole time. And you know, that was kind of because there was so many different people performing. It was a kind of case of turn up, play, let's go. You know, we'd done a little kind of rehearsal the night before. But it wasn't until I seen some of the videos and the pictures that I'd kind of got sent. I think, wow, that's actually looks really good.
And I could see you in the video in the little close-ups, looking up and having a little scan, making sure things are going right.
Just seeing what people are doing, like, because that's the track, the vocal that's in there. So all the kind of drums and some of the synth noises, that's all live hardware. And I didn't really plan. I just thought I'm just going to wing this really and see what, because it's quite difficult. I didn't know what it was going to be like, so I didn't know how to plan. But I had that the vocals and that bass line. That's just I've just ripped out of a track that I've been working on, taken all the drums off and just exported it as that part of the file. And I thought if I just play that and then play the hardware over the top of it and just see how it goes, and it worked. It worked quite amazing. Well.
So for anyone who isn't sure, maybe you could just give us a very like setup for dummies sort of thing. So you could explain. So we had there was DJ decks there as well as your live hardware. So you were playing both, mixing in other people's music that's already been made that you've bought from Bandcamp or wherever, and then playing your own music.
Well, it kind of started as like I've got a Roland drum machine, a Roland TB3, which is a little like acid box, and a Moog Mother 32, and that all plugs into my Roland mixer, which is like my studio mixer, and that then goes into a channel at my DJ mixer. So I'd exported a track that I've been working on that's got the vocal and the wee bass line. I just ripped all the drums out of that on Ableton and exported that individual file as a kind of, once I started playing with the drum machines, and I can put that in because it's got that little bit of a hook to keep people interested. And I think the vocals kind of resonate with me as well, because it's not your traditional club context in a sense, which is what the song and where I've taken that sample from is about. So I thought that actually fits that environment as well, like the story in the song almost made for that moment in a sense. It's kind of strange.
It's a really beautiful footage, and like, even like you were saying, you know, it's not that whole opportunity to have like what is a very well produced video of yourself performing in an amazing space with great technical setup doing both live and DJing came from reading about it online and thinking, oh, you know what? I'll just get in touch and let's just see what there is. You know, like if this is an open call for lots of different things, then maybe my thing can fit in that too. And I think that's a really important point to make about, you know, like, don't dissuade yourself because you think, oh, the music I make is maybe too niche or underground or people won't get it. I think a lot of times people get it because they see how much you're into it and they get it because of how you're presenting yourself in that moment. And I want to talk a little bit about actually your production practice. We've spoken a little bit about not having enough hours in the day already. But I was just wondering if there's some techniques that you have that help you to manage to hold down a full-time job and everything that comes with just having a life, personal life, relationships, but also time to create for yourself. And if you have any tips and tricks for anyone struggling with that at the moment.
I think it's well, for me, I mean, everyone works differently, but for me, I kind of, by the time I finish work, I've made dinner, I've walked the dog, it's kind of like 7 till 9 usually is my time to be creative and in the studio and working on, whether it's doing some admin or I'm sitting writing a track. You know, that's my kind of time. There's things like something called an app called Trello that I use quite a lot. So I've got like a Trello board, and that actually sets up like, well, this is my objectives for the next 3 years. And then I've got like a backlog of things, and then I've got my sprint for my month. So if I want to, this is what I'm doing this month, and I've got it done. So it's just like a board, like a big whiteboard, but it's electronically, and I move things. So I've got my vision for the next 3 years. I've got broken that down. Well, what do I need to do? And then, you know, that helps me manage my time. And if I have like a little idea when I'm driving, for example, like, oh, well, pull over, punch that in, and then
it's on the board.
Backlog, you know, it might be something I do 2 months later, but I've got that little note to remember to do it. I've started putting deadlines on things a lot more. So I need to upload this to the distributor by this date. I need to have this track off to mastering by this date. And it's, you know, set a goal when I work back and figure out how to work that out. And, you know, what do I need to do? So I find that really helpful over the last year. I've been using that. But I think it's just kind of dedicating time to it, really. If, you know, whether it's half an hour, 45 minutes or 10 minutes, you know, it's still that time to do whatever you want to be doing in that moment, which can help.
Absolutely. And I think as well, it can, like you say, having a visual aspect to the kind of whirlwind that is our mind really helps to channel your focus in that moment, as knowing, okay, 7 till 7:30 I've got on Trello, for example, or a whiteboard on your bedroom wall for if you know, like for the same thing, is like, okay, I'm going to be sending emails. So that's, you're already in that mindset going into it, that's what you're going to be doing for that time. It also means that it doesn't feel like everything's kind of jumbled up and on top of you, and you're not able to pull it apart and pull apart different aspects that you want to work at different times.
I've got things color coded as well. So I've got like a color code for social media, I've got color codes for admin, I've got one for DJ, and I've got one for the record label, I've got one for clubs, graphic design. So it helps if I can look at it and think, right, I've got a lot of admin color on there, I really need to do some admin. Or I've got a lot of social media planning, then okay, I need to focus time on that. So it helps kind of focus my time on where I really need to actually be.
I think maybe what we could do is you could, after this session, you can send me the details of Trello and any other similar apps and online resources, and we can post them. We'll post them in the kind of description of the YouTube upload, just for anyone who's interested in it. Because I mean, that's definitely something I struggle with, kind of trying to wear too many hats and
I know what you mean.
Cook about 5 different meals at once. It feels like you know, like it can. You end up just doing none of them very well because you are not giving yourself ample time to commit to one thing at a time, because there's too much. So you put it off, and then all of a sudden you have to do it all at once because you've not, you know, like if there's a deadline or something like that.
Well, that's definitely helped me, because I'll sit down and like, right, I'm making music tonight, and that's what I'm doing, and I don't even open my email, because if I sit down and open my emails, I get sucked into responding to this or responding to that, and if I want to go and do emails, I don't open up Ableton, because likewise I'll get sucked into some little idea I had 2 days ago, and it's just kind of prioritization really of what needs to be done at that moment in time.
I think that's a really good tool and a technique is to be like, yes, it all falls under one umbrella, but the different kind of branches of it need to have their own attention span. And as we become less and less attentive day by day due to apps and social media and the amount of information that we're taking in, it's good to try and simplify and streamline your working time to a way that you're going to get the best out of it, because as life goes on, you pick up more and more commitments and more things that take up more of your time, whether it be, like you say, walking a dog, or if you have a project on at work that needs a lot of time, maybe your evenings aren't going to be able, you're going to have to kind of reduce the amount of time that you have. So instead of being like, okay, I've got half an hour, cool, I'm going to write 2 emails and try and do 20 minutes of producing, like having it scheduled is a really, really handy tool. We've spoken, I'm aware of the time, we are kind of running towards the last 15 minutes. But you've talked about obviously making, you make your own music under Acutech and release it under Flick Techno, and have released on other labels and whatnot. I was wondering how, before Flick Techno became the record label, how were you approaching other record labels, or was it kind of similar to what we've talked about before? Because I know obviously certain record labels do events, and it may be easy to reach out to them and physically meet up with them, but it's not always easy because it's 150 miles, and it might not. You might not want to drive 150 miles to go for a quick chat and a coffee with someone about a potential release.
I was just reaching out to people, really thinking about the kind of networks I was in at that moment in time, looking at people in that similar network, and okay, well, who are they working with and releasing with, and kind of watching a little bit of what's happening with that, and what are the label actually doing as well. And I've had stuff pulled off before, because I was like, well, no, I've had somebody put tracks out before they didn't even master, and I just like, nah, take that off now. And that was quite early on, and I didn't learn enough. But now, I think it's just kind of thinking about where you want to go, where do you want to position yourself in the industry, and what kind of music are you writing. You don't want to send a slam and techno track to a drum and bass label. A little bit of research into where you want to go, and even looking at other artists that are on these top flight labels that you want to get onto, and where did they start releasing on. If you go way back to their Beatport catalog, you might get a little idea there, and maybe you can kind of make some connections there as well.
Absolutely. And I think also as well, the I think it's really important to have big dreams of what it is that you want to do creatively, but also to be realistic about the steps in which and the time it can take to get to that point. One thing, like you just mentioned, is looking at your favorite artists and seeing where they are there in that moment, and being like, okay, let's look back at their discography, find out where they started, and see if that label's still running. If it's not, then looking at labels that are affiliated or are adjacent to, similar in sound, like you've said. One big thing I think as well, which is really important, is obviously initially you're going to be sending things out to lots of different people. And even if it is to all like the similar sounding, kind of similar vibed record labels that you want to be releasing on, you really do need to make sure you're not coming across as this copy and paste kind of email that is instantly discernible as, okay, this person's just done a mass email to everyone. And even just little things like always reading through your email before you send it, just double checking everything, grammar, spelling, making sure you're putting the right person's name. I mean, I've one file of doing that in the past, where I've been in such a rush to get a promo sent out to lots of different DJs for my record label that I've done the worst thing possible, which is copy and paste someone else's name like 4 or 5 times on an email. And then you have to go back with your tail between your legs and try and try and make it okay somehow. Like, oh, I'm sorry that, but there's no way to get around that.
No, I think just taking your time and thinking about what's being written, who's it going to, are they going to resonate with it, and just trying to, it does take sometimes a few. I mean, I've got labels that I've sent stuff to, and I'll probably continue to send stuff to, just because they're maybe listening and not picking it up, or maybe not even listening. Just keep going. I think you have to have quite thick skin, I think, in the music industry, and don't be disheartened by a no. I think a no is actually sometimes good. A yes is even better, but sometimes a no is good because it's still a response, and it helps build that relationship.
Absolutely.
And if somebody sees, okay, we've given this guy 5 no's and he's still sending us tunes, and each time they're getting that little bit better and a little bit better, it'll get to a point and it's like, actually, we'll take it, and it only takes that like one tune or the right person, the right day to actually open that email. And I think it's just about persistence, really.
That way,
and over spam in a sense as well.
And persisting in a respectful way, and understanding that the people on the receiving end are also human too, and are also maybe kind of like burdened with lots of different other things going on at that moment, and maybe having an off day, and it's not because you've never met them, so it's not a personal thing. It can often be that they're having a bad day, or this is the 10th or the 1000th email that they've read that day, and they're just not ready to engage, and maybe their ears are tired and they're not able to hear the music how you're intending it, because you're sending out thinking, great, this is going to be the first thing they listen to, or they're really going to sit down for the full 20 minutes and listen to this whole 4-track EP. And realistically, it doesn't happen like that. People just don't have the time to dedicate. I was interesting, when you said you started Flick to kind of start providing for yourself and creating opportunities for yourself. But what have been some kind of difficulties, if there have been any, that you faced when getting Flick started?
Yeah, I think most of the challenges have come post-pandemic, I think, and post-lockdown, because I feel like the landscape has changed a lot, and it's not the same as it was before we all went in lockdown. The crowds changed, the atmosphere, the general going out has changed. We were doing gigs that were like sit-down gigs, and that was a lot of hard work and stress, and it's like trying to, all the rules keep changing, and trying to keep on top of, okay, what can we do? What can't we do? What are, it constantly has changed over the last while. I feel like now we're getting back to a position where it's kind of getting back to where it maybe once was. But I think it's just keeping it consistent as well, and keeping it kind of engaging for people can be quite a challenge sometimes. Especially in such a small area. It's I think it's I'm wanting to start trying to nurture a little bit more of the talent as well, and thinking about doing like an open deck night, so people want to play, then they can turn up and they'll maybe get like 15 minutes on the decks. If they register beforehand on an email or something, so I know who's coming, so I don't get inundated.
So you've got to sign up or something like that.
Sign up or something, because there might be people that maybe want to play that we just don't know how to go about it, and like, well, maybe that's so it's
and just giving people an opportunity to have a go, and to see what it's like to stand behind on the other side of the table, so to speak. And that might be, they may have never mixed 2 songs together before in their lives, and that could be the beginning of something. And you then have a load of new DJs that you get to, come and play for the night, and it makes it more interesting as well for the community around, because then they're going to be hearing another person's take on what their idea of dance music is, because obviously it's great to be able to play week in, week out, but you also want there to be a variety of sounds to keep people interested and keep people engaged.
Well, that was why I kind of wanted to put the drum and bass one on the weekend just past, because there hasn't been drum and bass for so long, and you know, there's quite a history of drum and bass in Forres over the last however many years, you know, so it kind of gave people that a little bit of a taste of something different.
Yeah.
Which
And
I
it
think
might be like you say, it might even be just the kind of the linchpin that helps someone to think, oh, you know what, I want to maybe put on a night too, or I want to, you know, like I want to invite my mates around and we'll organize something ourselves, and that's how the community grows even further, because that's essentially is you don't want to be the only one doing it. You know, you want to be able to go out to someone else's night and enjoy yourself and not be wearing security, doorman, lighting and sound and DJ and promoter hats all in at one time. You want to be able to go out and enjoy it as well, because otherwise it's all work all the time for you, like you said. You know?
I haven't been going out an awful lot recently, but when I go out, I'm gigging, so I'm working. So it's you know, it's important to rest as well, I think, overall, you know, and give yourself a bit of rest. You know, I have a bit of break for a couple hours a day and then I'm back on doing stuff, and then, you know, before I know it, it's bedtime. You know, it's important to give yourself a rest, I think, as well.
Because otherwise it can just become very quickly very unenjoyable. You can feel like you're forcing yourself to try and do something, and then you can start to associate the thing that you love with a point of stress, and it sometimes is really difficult to let go of that once it's taken hold, without taking a really long kind of sabbatical or something like that. You mentioned the kind of open decks thing, and I know that you've had some younger DJs come through and play for you in the past, and I thought what we might do is, I'm aware of the time, so we're just gonna play a quick snippet from one of the DJs from Flick who's played, and maybe you can just give a quick introduction and then we'll carry on for the last 2 minutes.
I think this is actually video from Saturday. I got a quick video on Saturday night, and I thought I'll try and get a little bit of footage.
Brilliant.
So I think this is Grigor. I think I put it on. So yeah, it should be
great,
fresh off the press.
Excellent. Wow. My God. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell that was just the upstairs social room of a pub in the northeast of Scotland. That looks like a club. I mean, the production level there is amazing. Like you're bringing something, you're bringing a lot to the table, and really trying to create that unique space in that moment as like a kind of time capsule, so that people can get an idea of what it is that maybe, if, like you say, they've also potentially turned 18 during the pandemic and have never gone out to a club, and this is the closest thing. So you've actually brought something that is really representative of what it is like in, say, Glasgow, London, Bristol, whatever, in a small room especially, which actually makes it, they're my favorites. Is way more in by the end of the night, you know everyone, they're all friends, they're more likely to come along, you're more likely to hang out with them outside of that environment as well.
There's a really good community vibe about it all, and you know, I've built up a little bit of a team. There's all like loads of people help me on the night as well, which I couldn't do it without them, you know, which all kind of builds to the atmosphere. You know, there is people that, like you say, have just turned 18, 19 that are out in the pub for the first time and they're coming along these nights, and there's also people that are, you know, in their 50s, 60s that are coming along as well and enjoying it, and it, you know, it's, and everyone in between, you know, and I think it's really quite a special thing, really. Everyone's sharing that dance floor and having fun and enjoying themselves.
Exactly. Really, and good. I think as well, like when we spoke last week, when we were kind of having a little chat about tonight, we touched a little bit upon the kind of idea of not needing to overextend what it is that you're trying to do. In a lot of ways, like you are very aware of the environment in which you're creating an event, and not trying to go beyond your means in terms of what it is that you know, like that you're trying to do. You're happy with the I would say that you have a lot of you're very humble in knowing that the space that Forres is still going to be Forres. It's still going to be a sleepy town in the northeast of Scotland. But once a month or once every couple of weeks, you can put something on. People can come, let their hair down, have a laugh, meet some new friends, open their mind to something that maybe they didn't expect in that area. And that is the kind of the essence of the community that you're trying to create. You're not trying to sell out and make a hyper successful commercial night where you're charging 100 quid on the door.
No,
and
fun, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's no fun at all.
Enjoy it, listen to some music, you know. Some people that have played, you know, their first ever gigs at Flick, there's quite a few of them have ever just played, you know, which I think is great. It helps give people that platform from a DJ perspective and to get into that side of things, but also gives people as a punter coming along to a night like that maybe hasn't experienced it as well. So it's bringing new experiences and atmospheres to the town that people can enjoy and have fun with, which I think is great.
Exactly. And it like, it's like that kind of war of attrition. It slowly turns the tide of the stigma around nightlife, and especially in the northeast, where, I mean, we're very well known for our pubs and our charity shops, and like having an actual club event space where people can come and try it out, experiment and see if it's something that they like, but don't necessarily need to commit wholly to it by traveling 100 miles to Aberdeen and then being like, oh, I didn't really like that. Oh, you know, but it's cost me £200 there and back, and on the night out with the drinks and all that kind of stuff. Sadly, we are out of time, Duncan. I mean, I feel like we could have carried on chatting, but I would like to leave it with one of your own songs you've made for yourself, that you've made yourself, so that everyone can get an idea and sign you up, and you can start touring the world. But also as well, we'll be putting, we can pop down Duncan's contact details. So if anyone wants to reach out to Duncan and lives in the northeast or in the area, please do, obviously. And myself as well. We're always looking for fresh blood to send us music and get involved in the community that we're a part of. But I'd just like to say thank you again, Duncan, for all your insights. I will be back again next week with Laura Johnson, who is a Finnish record label A&R, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that. But for now, Duncan, once again, thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. It's good to chat.
Cheers now.
Cheers. See ya.